Hey everybody, welcome back to another It Figures review. Today we're going to take a look at the amazing Yamaguchi Wolverine by REVOLTECH.
Wolverine.
Okay, this guy just came out, well, today, so let's first take a look at the box and then we'll open him up. Here we've got the preview window showing off the figure, and of course we'll get to him in a second. We've got a bit of an action pose here showing off the figure's articulation. And as I said in the opening, this is an amazing Yamaguchi figure by REVOLTECH. And this is Wolverine, of course, and he's number 5 in the series. And this one was sculpted by Yamaguchi Katsuhisa. As you already know, Wolverine is one of the X-Men, but hey, if we can't get him in the new Marvel vs. Capcom, at least we can get a good figure of him, right? Going over to the one side here, we've got some photography of Wolverine and just some fun text to make the whole thing colorful and comic book-like. And on the other side is more figure photography. On the top is the same information that we saw on the front and some more comic book art. On the bottom we've got some more artwork, and this isn't actually the same costume that he's wearing in the figure. It looks like they've used a few different sources of Wolverine artwork, so it doesn't quite match all the pictures, funny enough. Okay, on to the back. So like the other amazing Yamaguchi figures, they've gone out of their way to make the back very comic book-like and fun. So here they're showing off the figure, his articulation, and then just some fun quotes. He's beating up Deadpool there. We can see some of the alternate faces he has here, as well as a list of his parts, multiple hands and claws, things like that. He also seems to have this slashing effect, which I guess can be put on other figures to look like he's clawing his way through them. Okay, I know you want to get to the figure itself, so let's open this up and take a look, shall we? Oh look, we've got a little Wolverine and Iceman hiding on the flap there. That's a nice little touch. This is a cool little backing, so this is just a selection of different Wolverines from the comics, and I guess they're just basically showing a bit of the history of the character, as they don't exactly match the figure itself. But it is a nice little inclusion, a little unnecessary extra piece just to show some Wolverine love. And I guess you could use that as a backdrop for displaying him if you wanted, but it is kind of big, so I'm not going to do it that way. Just a small instruction sheet this time showing how to switch out his claws, which is great that they gave us the option to do clawed hands and non-clawed hands, as well as the slashing effect, so it looks like it plugs in where normally the figure's stand would plug in. Alright, let's get him out of there, shall we? I just gave him a whiff and he's got a strong figure smell. It's very gratifying. First things first, let me get all these little plastic pieces off. I just have to pop them apart. As always, before we take a look at the figure, let's just see the parts that he came with. First of all, this is his stand and some extra joints in case you break one. I'm not going to take that out of the bag because I never use them and I don't want to lose them, but you can see they're just standard parts in there. As for his hands, he's got a pair of just kind of wild, grabby hands. And these are the spots where you can pop the claws in, and we will take a look at that in a moment. So here we've got a pair of kind of gripping hands actually. Now, he doesn't come with any swords or anything like that, but let's say you had the Deadpool, which I don't have, but he comes with swords, I believe, so you could probably slide those in there pretty easily, as Wolverine is often shown using katanas. But I think any other figure you could take their swords or maybe even little guns and pop those in his hands. And these are exclusively sheathed hands, so you cannot put the claws on there. Then he also has this single hand, which looks like a little pinchy hand. Maybe he's going to grab somebody's cheeks, but actually I think what it is this was made for the fans that want to include a cigar in Wolverine's hand. Now, he didn't come with a cigar, and I think that's because Marvel and also Disney are cracking down on not showing Wolverine smoking, as they want to make it more family friendly, but you know, fans of the old comics of course want to see him that way. So I feel like if you wanted to make a little cigar out of something, or even maybe buy one from another figure, it would suit him well, and that's probably what this hand is for. Most importantly, we've got his claws. Now these are big, crazy, chunky claws. The whole figure for me is reminiscent of the old X-Men versus Capcom game. That style of Wolverine where he's very chunky and beastly, and this is very angular and everything. They really remind me of that, but they're well done. They're a little bit flexible. If you bent it too much, they might snap, so I would say be careful with them, but they are well done. I don't know if they're exclusively left or right, but you should be able to just peg them into any of the hands like this. Easily slides in, and it's a really sturdy fit that's not going anywhere. Looks good. As for the heads, we've got a really, I don't know, disgruntled Wolverine here. He's not having a good day. Looks like maybe someone like Deadpool's giving him a hard time, and this is his reaction. The mask itself isn't actually black. I was expecting him to be more of a black color, but they actually went with this deep, deep blue, which looks really good, and it's a lot more comic book-like. Mine has a little bit of a paint problem there under his nose, and I guess around the nose line on the mask, but it's really not that noticeable, actually. He looks pretty good. The other head is a pretty classic screaming, I don't know, heavy metal Wolverine, which looks really good. He's got a lot of rage, nice profile. He's almost a little creepy this way. Looks good. And then the other is the head on the figure himself, and this is a really calm, more stoic looking Wolverine. A bit more heroic or posing with the team. Smaller eyes, things like that. Looks really good too. And last but not least is his slashing effect. So I guess we have to test this on a figure, don't we? Now, as this is designed for the Yamaguchi figures, I thought we could test this on my Yamaguchi Spider-Man, which of course I will link in the description and in the video so you can watch my review of that. But this piece should just pop straight onto his back like that. There we go. So it looks like now Wolverine's being slashed in a very animated style. Once again, this reminds me a lot of the game. I feel like a lot of the inspiration came from that old arcade game. It looks good. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. I don't think I'll use it too much, but it is an interesting effect for, you know, a character that doesn't really have any kind of power weapons or anything like that. So finally, let's get to the figure himself. So talking about the sculpt first, they did a good job on him, I think. He's a very beefy 90s kind of Wolverine. You can see all the muscles, and then he's got many veins everywhere, especially on the back of his neck. You can see all these layers of muscles that they've done. His costume is a good blend between the more modern one and then the more 90s style. So he's still got the tiger stripes on the sides, but then this actually comes all the way down, as in his more recent style. Things are pretty exaggerated, so the earpieces, I guess they're about right, but they went with the bigger size ones. He's got the oversized shoulder pads, which I like. Like I said before, the claws are pretty big, but I think on this scale figure and this design it works really well, even though technically those would never fit inside there. He's got his nice X belt buckle. You can see some of the seams on his suit. Those run all over the place, around all these edges, even on his back. His boots have the fins tightly tucked there into the sides, and some wrinkle work and whatnot on there. As for the paint, mine is really good, except for that little blotch that I had on the nose of one of the heads. Everything else is really clean and tight for the most part. The seam on the gloves is pretty good. There's no real mess on the mask. All this line work is cleanly done. They went with a kind of interesting metallic blue, so there's a few different blues going on here. I don't know how well it's going to show up, but the blue on his gloves and his mask are kind of one color. Then his shoulder pad and side is another more metallic blue. The mask blue continues on into his boots, and then I wasn't expecting this. They actually used a gray on here, and then gray on his belt. I guess I was expecting more of a black or something here, so it's kind of a odd suddenly to have this gray thrown in, but it doesn't actually look that bad from a distance. Then his claws there have a really nice silver metallic look. It really picks up the lighting very well. And then his skin, it's almost a little translucent looking. They did a good job on making it very skin-like. It's not too shiny, and there's just a little bit of airbrushing here and there to give it some depth. Now, if you weren't a fan of the other Yamaguchi figures, and by that I mean the very obvious articulation, you're not going to be a fan of this either. His chunkiness does help hide some of the articulation. Unlike the Spider-Man, where it's much more obvious because he's so skinny, they were able to hide a lot more of that on Wolverine. So I would say from his torso down, he looks like a pretty regular figure. You don't really notice any of the articulation as being anything different than a fairly standard action figure. But his arms do take a bit of a hit, so if he's going to raise his arms up, it's extremely obvious. Something strange is going on. I wonder where he puts his deodorant. And then his elbow, well, not quite as bad. It's still somewhat obvious depending on how you're going to pose it, if you're going to do something like that. But if you just tuck it in a bit, it's a lot less noticeable. I find these figures are all about just finding quite the right angle and then it looks really good. But change that a bit and suddenly it's really obvious. But thanks to that articulation, we can get some really great posability. So he can quite literally cross his arms if he wanted to, which looks fantastic that way. And even from the back, although you can see those pieces, I think you're not going to notice it too much when you're actually posing him on your shelf, something like that. So his neck has a floating piece there, then between his head and the base of his neck, we've got articulation, so he can get a lot of range going on. He can tuck his head right down into his body like that, if he wants to smell his nipples. And without showing any gaps, that's about as far down as he can go, but you can extend that even more if you don't care about that. Looks like he has abs on his back. That's amazing. He's got a hole in his back, and this is for his stand. He can also get his arms really far behind him, but then this articulation starts to look pretty ridiculous at that point. His arms can go straight out, or he can grab his own shoulder if he wants to. I do find this bigger neck piece has a tendency to want to pop out a little bit. It's not too bad, but just if you're working it a lot, like I'm playing with him a lot here to see all his posability, once in a while I have to push it down a bit just to get it nice and stuck in there. So he can get a bit of range side to side, doesn't really seem to hold too much, but he can crunch pretty far down, and then he can go back a little bit, not too much. His legs can go out about that far, up about that far, and back right to the back of his, to his back. This little crotch piece is actually a little bit rubbery, not too much, but enough that, you know, it's not going to get in the way of his posability. As for his knees, they look really good when they're straight, and actually don't look that bad when they're folded right back either. There's a little bit of a spike, but I don't think it's that big a deal. Of course, he can swivel too, like this. I forgot to mention that. And he can also swivel at the top of his boot, so he's got a bit of articulation there, forward and back, and this is separate from the knee. Then at his ankle, he's got one of their normal joints there, so he can go about that far back like a ballerina, and a good amount side to side, plus a toe joint. Now these are, same with my Spider-Man, they're always really stiff the first time I do these toes, so I would be careful. Just wiggle it a bit until it starts to give, and then it'll be fine. So to change out his head, all you gotta do is wiggle that off. This floaty neck piece is gonna come off separately. Take your new head of choice. I find it's easier to stick this up in here instead of on the neck, because that fits pretty snugly in there. and then find that piece in there. Do your best to line it up. It can be a little difficult. Like I find this yellow piece can fall out, or this peg will bend back a bit, but eventually you can get it. And there you go. Good as new. So there you go. I think he's a pretty good figure. He's a nice addition to any X-Men fans collection. He's a really good, I guess, old 90s style and video game version of Wolverine. I think the next one coming out is Magneto. I've already pre-ordered that actually, so I'll be sure to review him here when he does come out. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and if you have any questions or comments, you can leave them below, and I'll do my best to help out. But that's the amazing Yamaguchi Wolverine by REVOLTECH. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.